natural energy resources, for example, we are a small state. So is human resources. In fact, our human resources, as most of you might agree, has been going down relative to the other parts of the world and especially this region. Sri Lanka is not a dominant destination of foreign direct investment. Okay? We have few Indian oil companies and few others, but compared to what real foreign direct investment is that you could see in countries like Singapore, for example, and very recently countries like Vietnam or India for that matter, we don't receive much. Okay. Therefore, we are small. Geoculturally, Sri Lanka is not a member of a larger civilizational group. My friend Susantha would know about this very well, this new concept of civilizational clash of civilizations, which Huntington was talking about. You know, we are a civilization unto ourselves. We are not a appendage of a larger civilization. So in terms of there are clashes of civilization in the global level, we are not part of it. Therefore, nobody will come to rescue us, neither we can go and ask for help from this context. Therefore, we are small. However, now we'll come to the global and regional geopolitical realities defining Sri Lankan geopolitics. Geopolitically, located within the Indian sphere of influence, as I told you. So, to be very frank, what is good for India is good for Sri Lanka, not vice versa, in the long run. Within the short run, they will allow, Indian national interest will allow Sri Lanka certain leverage. But beyond a certain point, it will not. Sri Lanka is an integral part of Indian security strategy. Okay? That's what I said. Our foreign ministry should have a separate, not a South Asian desk, but a separate Indian desk. The people there should be thinking nothing but what the next move of India is going to be. Located strategically in the Indian Ocean, that you already know. I'll show you a map in a minute. Located next to the most important international maritime shipping lane. For the first time, Sri Lanka is realizing this. Sri Lanka is an integral part of Chinese geopolitical strategy of string of pearls. Now, that's where the problem is. We are, at the same time, a part of two geopolitical strategies of two major powers which are competing for supremacy in the Indian Ocean, which could eventually lead to a Cold War as well. Okay, this is the international shipping routes. You can see Sri Lanka is, it's just south of Sri Lanka. That's the reality. Whether it is oil, whether it is goods, whether it is drugs or weapons. It just goes right below. I mean, if you stand tall in Hambantota, you might actually see those ships. This shows the situation of military, strategic situation in the Indian Ocean. As you could see, you can see the red flag is the China flag. They are all around. Okay. In Myanmar, in Sri Lanka, Hambantota that is, in Pakistan, Gwadar. And this is the string of pearls. India is jittery about it. But whether we like it or not, now Sri Lanka has become part of that strategy as well. And therefore, we are on a hot situation, could be even more dangerous. This is the political military calculus of the Chinese. You can see they are covering here in Sri Lanka and Pakistan as well. And also in different levels, their influence is found in other places. Now, in this context, what are the geopolitical choices for Sri Lanka? We can be a part of an anti-West camp, like Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and we can continue to utter anti-West rhetoric in our, even in our official communications. It's okay to have a newspaper interview where we become anti-West, but when you make official statements against that, then there is a problem, because then there's the West and of course the Europe and all that is just they just follow what the US says. There is really no independent geopolitics in Europe either. Okay, US tells them what they do and they do that. So if we become that, then there is the potential enemy is the US and the West. We can be a part of Chinese geopolitical strategy for the Indian Ocean, but then the potential enemy is India. Okay, India has allowed China to build the Hambantota, but I think they are very closely watching as to what kind of ships coming into Hambantota. And that is why a consulate in the south, Indian consulate in the south, I can't understand why they're having one in Kandy and in Jaffna. In the south, the only reason is because there are a lot of Chinese in Hambantota. Be an integral part of Indian geopolitical strategy, that's another option available. But now that we have committed ourselves to the Chinese pearl of India, string of pearls, the potential enemy is China. Any one of these models could make Sri Lanka geopolitically vulnerable as supporting one state against another. Okay, we are already in it. Now that is where the problem is. Now, what can we do? Last presentation slide. Security of shipping lanes. Now we know that when you look at the national interest of all these major powers, the US, China, India, and of course you can bring in Australia, Japan and others, the security of shipping lanes is the common denominator of the geopolitical strategy of the US, the China and all the others as well. They all agree. Therefore, we could become an active agent of Indian Ocean geopolitical security strategy. This was hinted even yesterday. Because if we are to protect the shipping lanes, and these ships belongs to everybody, no potential enemies, but it becomes a friend of all. We are protecting the Chinese ships, Indian ships, US ships, our own ships, and anybody else except LTT, which doesn't exist any longer. This can be done without challenging national security strategy of India also. We could say, all right, let's work together. And there is no reason why India should be feeling any threatened by if Sri Lankan strategy is to protect the naval route. Sri Lanka need to take the pro-action. Now, this is where the problem comes. This is what, Rohan, you mentioned even yesterday about communication, telling the world first. Now, we look at this Darusman report, for example. What do? We are reacting to Darusman report. Instead of a Darusman report, there should have been, before Darusman report, a Sri Lankan report. Well, we have a Sri Lankan report, but that as a reaction. This reactive reaction to the world, reaction to everyone else, has become is a fundamental problem in how we handle things. National politics as well as international politics. That is where the problem is. So at least, now that we have realized this, we need to take this pro-action and inform all the major geopolitical players. This is what Sri Lankan geopolitical strategy for the future. Rather than somebody coming and telling us. Okay? There are no permanent friends and enemies in geopolitics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is something that Sri Lanka need to realize. Not only in politics, neither in geopolitics. Only thing permanent in geopolitics is the national interest. Okay? If the national interest of India is compromised by Sri Lanka, India will take action and we can't do much about it. Paritpu drop is the classic example as the previous presenter mentioned. Okay? In the past, when Sri Lankan action became a challenge to either to the Western or Indian geopolitical interest, they did not hesitate initially to pressurize, then to influence, and there were occasions even to intervene. India is the country that intervened us. Likelihood of this is happening again is real. Depends on to what extent Sri Lanka is willing to go, willing to challenge the Indian national interest. Now with the Chinese interest growing in Sri Lanka, okay, Sri Lanka need to be extremely careful. In the past, in addition to what I just mentioned, Sri Lanka has also practiced a policy of friendly relations with all other states, India, China, the US, and the West. There are occasions where we have challenged, we became a challenge, but greatly we have been friendly with all. That is what I call the enemies of none and friends of all. As a small state, there's nothing to lose. This has been the most beneficial to Sri Lanka with least negative consequences to the country. You're getting the benefit of everybody and, it doesn't have negative consequences. This has to be done very carefully because we are already in a situation, it is from which there are things to undo as much as things to do. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs need to be proactive and assess the options and their merits of all the options that I outlined earlier and prescriptive, the last option. Thank you.
Professor Henanayak, your presentation is of exceptional use and value to the officers and guests who are here. I only wish that you made this presentation to the Sri Lankan Parliament. But let me now invite the members of this audience to pose questions to Professor Henanayak. Yes.
You could ask. Oh, you're waiting for the microphone.
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you. I am Indika Pereira. I am a lawyer as well as a lecturer. It's very interesting what you just mentioned. And the end line, the tag is fascinating. But when it comes to practical reality, my personal view is that we are already kind of more into the Chinese geopolitical strategy. So in such a condition, how could we, save ourselves, or with all this international pressure coming in? And as you, in a way, correctly said that even our foreign minister going to moon and speaking, nothing is going to change. So are we to sit and do nothing, or what can we do?
Okay. Oh, we have to do a lot. We have to do a lot. First is to understand exactly where we are. What happens, I think, when I'm listening to these utterances coming from various quarters, it's simply because they don't understand where we are. The small state, that's a fact, undeniable fact. Okay? That's the very first thing to do. And second, now remember, India allowed Hambantota to happen as it has happened up to now. That is because building a harbour in Hambantota is not the challenge. That's okay, but then they had their counter activity of having the listening post in the south to observation post to find out what is going on. But I think what will really challenge India is if and when the Chinese naval ships, frigates, the newly refurbished carrier